What's going on, everyone? Real talk. After reading these stories, I looked at my neighbors a little differently. Subscribe for more if that's your thing, and let's get into it. I, 26 Viafiel, realized the guy at my gym deliberately memorized my exact schedule. When I changed my routine, he changed his to match. I finally have proof. What follows is a story about patterns, about routine, and about the creeping realization that someone else has been learning the rhythm of your entire life. It's the kind of story that makes you question whether anything you do is really private anymore. I've been going to the same gym for about a year now, and I have a routine that's almost obsessively consistent. Weekday mornings at 6:30 a.m. sharp, I do 20 minutes on the treadmill, then move to the free weights section. Tuesdays and Fridays are upper body days: chest, shoulders, back. Wednesdays and Saturdays, I do legs. It's just me, my headphones, and about 10 other early morning regulars who I see but don't really know. Most of them nod in passing. A few are friendly. One of them is a guy who looks to be in his late 30s, always wearing the same faded gray gym hoodie. Sometimes it's gray, sometimes it's a darker shade of gray, but it's always that same hoodie. For months, I barely registered his existence. He was just part of the scenery, like the motivational posters on the wall or the water fountain in the corner. I didn't know his name. I didn't know anything about him. Then came a Tuesday in March. I had to come in at 2:15 p.m. instead of my usual 6:30 a.m. A work scheduling thing, a meeting that ran long, nothing I thought twice about. I walked in expecting a completely different crowd, different music, different energy entirely. The gym at 2 p.m. is a different animal than the 6:30 a.m. crowd. But he was there. In his usual spot by the free weights, the exact same corner he would normally occupy at 6:30 a.m., as if the time of day didn't matter to him at all. Our eyes met for maybe a second. His jaw tightened when he saw me. Something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe annoyance, something that made my stomach drop in a way I couldn't explain. Then he grabbed a towel and walked to the locker room. It happened so fast I almost wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing. She didn't know what that moment meant yet, but she was about to spend the next 3 weeks paying attention to everything, noticing patterns she'd somehow missed, and slowly understanding that this wasn't coincidence. But that Tuesday afternoon was just the first crack. The real certainty took 3 more weeks to settle in, and by then, I couldn't pretend anymore. I told myself it was nothing. Bad luck. Maybe he'd picked up an afternoon shift. But then I started paying attention. The very next Wednesday, I changed my schedule to 7 a.m. instead of 6:30, and he was already there. Already in the free weights section. Friday, I went at 5 p.m. instead, and he was in my usual spot, waiting. That's when I knew. His locker was 3 down from mine. He'd time his visits so he'd be changing when I walked through. On the treadmill, he'd pick the machine 2 spots over, positioned perfectly for him to watch me. Quick glances, over and over. Checking my pace, tracking where I moved next. One day I made eye contact on purpose. He held it. 3 seconds, just staring like he was studying something he'd taken notes on. I felt my stomach drop. He looked away first, but that second was enough. I'd seen something predatory in that look. Not threatening yet, but calculating. That's when the 3 weeks of denial collapsed. Someone had memorized my schedule, my patterns, my routine. Someone had been learning me like I was a project. And the sickest part was knowing he was aware I'd figured it out. He just didn't care. Now comes the spiral. The moment she saw the pattern, every detail rewrote itself. Every time I caught him looking now, I saw the calculation behind it. He'd be watching me on the treadmill, and the second I glanced his way, he'd turn back to his weights with this frozen expression, like he'd been caught. But he was adjusting, always adjusting, moving equipment to get a better angle, switching machines on days I typically used them. The locker room timing was the worst. He'd show up maybe 2 minutes after I did. I realized he was studying my habits down to the minute. What I touched, how long I spent on each machine, the order I did things in. He knew my schedule better than I knew it myself. He knew I'd be on the leg press on Saturdays. He knew I always hit the heavy bench on Tuesdays at 6:55 a.m. And he was there, every single time, perfectly positioned in my line of sight. Someone had turned my routine into a research project, and I was the subject of study. That's when the dread settled in. Not fear exactly, but this creeping horror that someone had made me their sole organizing principle. 6 months of obsessive documentation. 6 months of learning me. I started seeing it everywhere, not as coincidence, but as predatory precision. Comments came in fast. Did he ever approach you or try to talk to you? Or was he just silently documenting and obsessing? I need to know if there was a moment where you two made direct contact. He never directly approached me, which is somehow worse. He'd look at me and turn away. A few times I caught him staring, and he'd get this frozen look before leaving the room. The detective said this pattern, documenting without direct contact, suggested he was building towards something. An introduction he'd already planned out in his head. He had notes about what he wanted to say to me. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't tested my theory and caught on when I did. But some landed harder than others. 6 months of this and nobody noticed? The gym staff failure is almost as disturbing as the stalking itself. Please make sure you're documenting everything with police and file a report about the gym's negligence. So she made a decision. She decided to test it. Only Maya knew the plan. Here's where the certainty came from. He showed up at my new gym. I have the security footage. I needed proof, so I broke my routine. Monday evening instead of Tuesday morning. 4 p.m. instead of 6:30 a.m. I told Maya if I saw him, we'd go to the police. I walked in shaking. He was already at my locker. When he saw me, our eyes locked. That focus. He grabbed a towel and left. My suspicion confirmed. I ran 3 more tests. Monday, 11 a.m., he appeared. Thursday, 3 p.m., appeared. Saturday, 7 p.m., appeared. Every time. No way he could know these random times unless he was tracking me. That's when I filed the report. The detective listened, then she said it. They'd found more. So much more. Hundreds of photographs. Me at the gym. Me in the locker room. Me at my car. Me outside my apartment. A notebook too. Meticulous. Every session logged. Every change documented. A haircut from months ago marked Change 3. I wasn't his routine. I was his obsession. The organizing principle of his entire life. He was charged. Restraining order issued, 1,000 feet away. But I couldn't stay at that gym. I switched locations to feel safe. He found me there too. At my new gym where he shouldn't even know about. I have security footage. He's still hunting me. He changed his routine when you changed yours? That level of anticipation suggests he might have been tracking you beyond the gym. How did he even know you'd switched your schedule? This is exactly what the detective's report suggested. The guy was likely tracking her on social media, occasionally following her, checking her car. He'd integrated surveillance of her into multiple aspects of his life. That's how he could pivot so quickly when her schedule changed. This was way bigger than being a creepy gym regular. The detail about him noticing the deodorant brand change absolutely chilled me. That level of observation isn't accidental. That's someone who made studying you his part-time job. On to the next one. The security footage didn't lie. Police analyzed 6 months of camera data and found him. Every single visit. Every time you changed your schedule, the next day, there he was, waiting in a different part of the gym, but always positioned to watch you. They found the notebook in his apartment. He showed up at my new gym. I have the security footage. I filed a police report with everything. The changed schedule tests, the photos, everything. Detectives served a warrant on his apartment. What they found? I still can't fully process it. Hundreds of photographs. Not just gym photos. Photos taken from outside my apartment building. Photos of me on the street, at coffee shops, the grocery store. He'd been following me for longer than I realized. The notebook had dates going back 8 months. He documented my haircut and labeled it Change 3. He had pages of notes about my workout patterns, what I wore, who I talked to. They charged him with felony stalking and placed a restraining order. He's in custody pending trial. But that wasn't the end of my fear. 3 weeks after his arrest, I got a message from the front desk at my new gym. He showed up. Said he had a membership there, too. Showed ID, paid his fee. By the time I got the call, I'd already left. Police increased patrols, but I couldn't go back. I couldn't breathe in that space knowing he'd been there, that he'd found where I moved to. Now, I don't have a routine anymore. I vary everything. Different gyms on different days, different times, never the same pattern twice. I watch reflections in windows when I walk. I check parking lots before I step outside. I've become someone who is always aware that I could be watched. What gets to her isn't the arrest or restraining order. It's that someone made her their project, the center of their entire existence. For 8 months, tracking her became his routine. Every change she made, he studied it. She became the blueprint for his days. The notebook with change 3 made my skin crawl. He was literally cataloging you like you were some kind of specimen. This is escalation behavior. And that's the thing that haunts her most. Not the photos or the notebook. It's knowing someone turned her existence into their obsession. She was studied with an attention most people save for their own dreams. If you have a routine, you should know this too. Someone could be watching. On to the next one. I just realized my childhood protector has been stalking me for 20+ years, and she lives on my street. 28-year-old male. The worst thing about lawn care as a side hustle is you knock on doors you've never knocked on before. Sometimes the person who opens that door completely rewrites your understanding of your past. I'm 28 and started doing lawn care 6 months ago for extra income. Last month I got a new client, a house about a block from my apartment. When she answered the door, I froze. It was Sarah, my childhood babysitter. I hadn't seen her in 15 years. Growing up, my father was violent. Home was hell. But Sarah's house was my escape. She was the only place I felt safe. Seeing her brought back this flood of relief, someone from the good part of my childhood. But then she opened that door wider and something shifted in her face. She wasn't surprised. She looked like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. "I always wondered if you'd come back to me eventually," she said. "I kept hoping you would." I forced a laugh. Small talk. But then she mentioned something casually while walking me around her yard. "I've been living in this area for about 2 years now. Funny how the world works, right?" That's when it hit me. 2 years. She'd been here 2 years. I've only been doing this job for a month. There's no way this is random. She wasn't asking a question. She was confessing. She was telling me that she'd positioned herself here, waiting for me. And the certainty in her voice made it clear this wasn't accidental. And that moment changed everything. Because confessions don't come wrapped in small talk. And waiting 2 years to reappear in someone's life isn't coincidence. It's intention. It's a confession. And he understood, standing there in her yard, that his entire childhood narrative had just been rewritten by 8 words. I've been living here for 2 years now. Part of him was relieved to see her. She'd been the only adult who ever made his home feel safe. But as that initial shock wore off, another feeling started creeping in. The wrongness. The waiting for you wasn't just friendly. It was knowing. I kept showing up because it was income. She was always home, always waiting like she knew exactly when I'd arrive. At first I thought maybe she worked from home. Then she started asking questions. Casual ones. "How's your apartment? You live alone? What neighborhood? What hours do you usually work?" I answered because she'd been my safe place, and I didn't think it was weird. But then she started knowing things. Specific things. She mentioned a job interview I had 3 weeks prior that I'd never told her about. She referenced my old elementary school by name, Riverside, after I'd mentioned it once to my sister on the phone in private. Then the real one. She said a girl's name. Christy. Someone I dated 3 months in high school. I'd never told anyone in my family about Christy. The way she knew these details made my skin crawl. The comfort of seeing her turned into something else. Her eyes were different. Not threatening exactly, but hungry. Possessive. like I was a thing she'd left on the shelf and was making sure nobody else had touched. I started dreading every work appointment at her house, but something wasn't right. The relief of seeing her face started mixing with something darker. So there she was, this woman who'd saved him from his father's house, doing this. Waiting. Watching. Knowing things she had no business knowing. And the worst part was the wrongness of it all was starting to crystallize. She wasn't protecting him anymore. That was over. This was something else. 3 days later, OP returned for basement maintenance work and needed to retrieve a tool. I was looking through the storage cabinet behind old painting supplies when I found it. A metal box. Heavy. Locked, but old enough that I could pry it open. I wish I hadn't. Inside were photographs. Dozens. Hundreds, maybe. All of me. Different ages, different houses, different years. Some from when I was 6, sleeping in her guest bed. Others from my teenage years, taken through windows into bedrooms I'd lived in. My bathroom mirror at 15. All documented, all time-stamped on the back. She had been photographing me for 2 decades. Not incidentally, deliberately, systematically. A timeline of surveillance preserved in a locked box. Every address, every phase of my life documented without my knowledge. The box was proof of something so calculated, so patient, that I couldn't process it at first. I just stared at the photographs, hands shaking, trying to understand how someone I remembered as safe had turned me into an archive. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't memory. This was evidence. What you're describing is decades of stalking and documentation without consent. Those photographs are evidence of crimes. Do not contact her again and file a police report immediately. The deliberate move to your neighborhood, the photographs spanning decades, the admission she was watching you, that's not affection. That's ownership. Prioritize your safety and get far away from her. The fact that she engineered moving to your area and has a 20-year photographic archive is beyond disturbing. This was calculated. That box is proof of premeditation. When I told her I'd moved into the neighborhood about 18 months ago, she said something like, "Oh, perfect, I was thinking about coming back to this area anyway." It barely registered at the time. But piecing things together since, she didn't just happen to move here. She saw that I lived here and she engineered her whole life around being close to me. Maybe through social media, maybe some other way I don't want to think about. That realization is what made me call the police instead of just cutting contact. And that's the moment the realization turns into action. OP came back with an update post. I filed a police report and learned she had other victims too. I confronted her that same day, walked up to her house, photographs in hand, and asked her point blank what the hell this was. She didn't even flinch, didn't deny a single thing, just looked at me and said, "I never stopped watching." Not sorry, not defensive, like she was stating a fact. I demanded to know how long, how much, why. She said it started when I was 6. She said she moved back to this neighborhood specifically because she couldn't stand not being in my life. That she tracked me down, made sure she was always somewhere nearby. That every photograph was because she loved me. She called it love. She called 20 years of covert surveillance and documentation love. Like she was protecting me instead of building a record of me. My entire childhood condensed into a metal box. And she did it all because the safe place I remembered, the one refuge in my house growing up, was actually a cage. The comments came in hot. This is textbook predatory behavior. They position themselves as your savior, then use that trust to control you. Your brain filed her as safe, and she exploited that for decades. The lock on the bedroom door, to keep your father out, is now extremely suspicious. Think about what might have actually happened in that house and why she kept it so secretive. That locked door plus the 20-year documentation pattern is exactly what law enforcement will investigate. It points to methodical grooming and control. Those photographs are going to be crucial evidence, and once they have the case open, they'll probably uncover a whole pattern of behavior with other victims. And that's where the real fight begins. That same night, OP made the call. I filed a police report and learned she had other victims too. I filed a police report that same night, showed them the box of photographs, every single one. The detective's face changed as he went through them. Surprise, disgust, focus. This wasn't just obsession. This was 2 decades of systematic documentation, surveillance, control. They started investigating immediately. She had a pattern. There were others. Different people, different neighborhoods, different years, but the same methodology every time. Same obsession, same careful cataloging. The police found documentation going back even further than what I had. I hired a lawyer the next day and filed for a restraining order. Approved in less than a week. The judge didn't hesitate once he saw what she'd done. I gave notice on my apartment. 2 months and I'm gone, moving to the opposite side of the country. I haven't spoken to her since finding that box. She tried calling twice. I didn't answer. Not because I was angry anymore, just because I had nothing left to say to her. The comments section filled up. People who recognized the pattern. People who understood what it means to have someone reshape their entire life around access to you. Here's what stuck. Do not go back to her house. Do not confront her again. She's already shown she violates every boundary. When you report this, let law enforcement handle it. Her behavior will escalate. What stands out about this story is how grooming doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't come with red flags. It doesn't hurt on first contact. Sometimes grooming wears the face of the person who saved you. The one safe place in your entire childhood. That could be a cage. The person you trusted most. That could be the one watching. The one documenting. Building a file. Making sure you can never escape their obsession. Safety was the lie. Love was the mask. What felt like rescue was actually control the whole time. That's what makes stories like this stick with you. That's what makes them matter. And that is the last story for today.